thank you everybody so much for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much Tricia and ECIA for this. And Angela, as always, really excited to always hear your presentation and more about Iowa Nice. I should say I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, but my dad is from Dyersville. I don't know if anybody knows Alex Baum, who lived there for a while.
I heard that name.
I know Clarabelle.
Yeah, so that's my grandmother.
That's your grandmother.
That's right.
Oh, well,
She's our woman of the year.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember that.
19, I don't know. That's awesome. 98, whatever.
I'm not as good as she is, but so I'm the Director of Advocacy, Data, and Learning at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, and wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about some research that we've done recently around our immigration community assessment, which is kind of looking at our region's immigrant populations and what are some of the priorities that those populations have, what are some of the barriers that they face, what are some of the assets in our community, and some potential recommendations that we could move forward with. But I first want to start with this question of why immigration? Why was this the research that we did? So if you can see this is a map of cumulative migration in Iowa. So this means the number of people coming into Iowa from outside the state versus leaving Iowa to places outside of the state. The blue line here is domestic migration. So that means the number of people from other states in the United States coming to Iowa versus leaving Iowa to other states. You can see that has been trending pretty negative for the past 11 years between 2010 and 2021. The green line is international migration, right? That is the number of people coming to Iowa from outside the country, or vice versa. Between 2010 and 2021, we've had a growth of about 17,000 people or actually 27,000 people, I believe it is. So 27,000 more people migrated to Iowa than left it. But if you remove international migration from that, the number drops to negative 35,000. So it's been one of the key demographic drivers for our state. Here's the Prosperity Eastern Iowa region, which ECIA is a part of, 5 counties around here, and you can see very similar trajectory. And here's Delaware County itself. So international migration has really been an important part of demographic changes. In fact, if you look between 2010 and 2022, actually, within the Community Foundation 7-county region, which includes Delaware and goes from Allamakee all the way down to Clinton, if you look at the growth of the population during those 12 years, 168% of it can be attributed to growth in the foreign-born population. That means if our foreign-born population, that's a census term, stayed the same as where it was in 2010, our 7-county region would have shrunk, and shrunk pretty significantly. And in general across that region, it's also getting younger as well. So this is the percent of children who are foreign-born with either a native or a foreign-born parent. So you can see for Dubuque County, that number doubled. The percent of children who are either foreign-born themselves or have a foreign-born parent doubled between 2010 and 2022. For the city of Dubuque, it nearly tripled. I included Delaware County in here, and it actually kind of went against the trend for our 7-county region and decreased during that time, and I was interested. So I looked at it, and you can see here that there generally was an increase in the amount until we hit the pandemic, and that's when things really started to change. So a question that I'm not prepared to answer, but something we can discuss is, will this trend continue back up right now as we start to move out of this? What does this imply and mean for the future? But generally, demographically, these are the fastest growing populations kind of within our region in northeast Iowa and eastern Iowa here. But our research has also found that these fastest growing populations are also struggling to succeed as we would expect them to be able to. So for foreign-born residents, they have a higher rate of poverty, generally have a lower percentage of earnings, suggesting that they're underemployed compared to native residents, again, another census term, and 5 times more likely to be uninsured within our 7-county region. But kind of the bigger challenge here is around connection, right? There just seems to be a barrier for immigrant populations coming in to get connected to those services and job opportunities and programs that we have. And a thing that has really struck to me, right, within our region, everything is kind of done by relationship, right? Relationships drive a lot of what happens. My laundry room got flooded with septic backed up into it a little while ago, and so when we looked for somebody who could tear up the floor and help us redo it, I didn't do a Google search, I asked my mother-in-law, right, who she knew, who could be the contact. That's really a wonderful part about our region and something that is great and part of the reason I like it here. But it also means that if you were a newcomer to the area and you don't have those established relationships, it can be very hard to build those kind of communication channels because we don't have the formal systems in place to allow people to get around that. And so we get a situation where populations that are bringing growth and dynamism and diversity and new ideas and youth into our region are also facing underemployment and academic challenges and really just this larger disconnect. And so the challenge that we kind of saw is that we can't officially connect these immigrant populations and enable them to thrive and succeed as we would expect. But then the opportunity is, well, what if we could do that? What if we were great at that? What if we were better than other regions in the United States at being able to do this connection? It's our belief that this would be a competitive advantage for our region, right? It would bring increased economic growth as we would address kind of talent and workforce shortages. It would bring new diversity and population growth to our region. It would lead to greater success for our academic institutions, which are seeing a decline in the number of student body that are coming in right about now. And, you know, most important, it's the right thing to do, right? It means that those families who are coming in are getting connected to resources, they're getting connected to services. Let me step back a little bit to make sure I'm on. And are getting, are able to thrive in the way that we're really hoping for and that we want. And so that was kind of our premise, right? With the right systems in place and the right changes, the demographic shifts that we're seeing in our region can be a major engine for economic growth and prosperity within our region. And so that leads us to the research that we conducted as kind of the first step for this. Now, this actually started out of some conversations that were being led by the sisters within our community, who kind of came together and recognized there's a lot of organizations working with immigrant populations, but we weren't talking together about it necessarily, and we weren't thinking strategically. So we began the research in 2019, and it's actually, I have a physical copy here, but you can find all of the research that we had up on our website. It's available right now. This is kind of what it looks like, all the different areas that we covered and the over 50 different recommendations that we made. You're not expected to understand this chart right here, but there's a lot of information. But I really want to touch on just kind of a couple areas for this presentation here. A little bit about workforce and employment, housing, and then education and youth support, because that's kind of connected with the work that ECIA is doing. So to start with workforce and employment, one of the recommendations we found was around supporting employers in hiring and retaining immigrant populations. So immigrants are our fastest growing populations. They are often underemployed, and we have a ton of job opportunities around the region that need to be filled. Seems like a great recipe, and yet a lot of local employers still struggle to be able to hire and effectively retain members of immigrant populations. We actually did a research project with some students from the MIT Sloan School of Management who came in and did research in Dubuque County, including in Dyersville as well, looking at what were some of the reasons for this. And some of the findings that they had were, first of all, speaking with immigrant employees. And one of the things that really struck with me was a lot of immigrant employees felt frustrated in the lack of a meritocratic system. They said, I am doing a lot of work, I've been there for a long time, I do trainings of other people, I serve in a supervisory role basically, I know machines that other people don't know, I do translations, and yet I'm not being compensated for that because English isn't my first language, right? I am not being rewarded with the amount that I'm giving back to the organization. And so that merit-based approach and frustrations around English-speaking employees being promoted at a greater rate, or discrimination. If there was a problem, a lot of people felt that they were the first one to be blamed because English may not have been their primary language, so it was assumed that they were at fault. When that happens, for a lot of our immigrant communities, they're not going to complain to the boss, they are not going to try to correct it, they're going to stay quiet, they're going to grow frustrated, and they're eventually going to quit and leave and find another place, which doesn't help. That's a lose-lose situation for both groups there. They also spoke about the need for additional translation services, housing being a challenge, and transportation barriers. Paperwork and status came up a lot, as well as just generally the lack of cultural competency from a lot of employers. Employers weren't sure how to effectively hire and retain Latino residents or Marshallese residents or whatever it might be. Speaking to companies, the researchers found that there was a very strong desire to hire from populations, but they felt that there was a disconnect. There wasn't certainty of how to go about with that. They found that a lot of companies in our area were at different stages when it came to kind of diversity and inclusion practices, many of them at an earlier stage. And an important part was they found that there might be different priorities, right? When a CEO says, yes, I want to hire from the Latino population, let's make it happen. If the HR team or the supervisors aren't necessarily on board in the same way, it's not going to work for the company. You really have to have a plug-and-play solution for a lot of companies where you can deal with these internal policies and procedures. And then finally, a lot about the lack of translation services and the challenges being able to translate documents and have those kind of conversations. And then finally, talking with service and government agencies, they found that there was kind of a disconnect. A lot of service organizations were focused on this kind of holistic approach, whereas for employers it was, I need somebody on my shift now. I need to get somebody in. What I'm concerned about is, am I going to be able to make the products that I need to be able to make? And so some of the solutions that came out of here was to be able to develop a local capacity to support employers, to help with some of that cultural expertise and that competency so that they can change policies, change procedures, and really be able to help reach new populations and help them be able to thrive. So some work that we are doing right now in Dubuque around this is developing a toolkit looking to hire and retain workers, which includes English language courses for employees, which is a very important part of the process. But we're also looking at, we just got a grant in actually to develop a consulting capacity so that we can have consultants go and work with employers to look at those policies and procedures and say, okay, here's something that you may need to change. Here is a way of doing business that's not going to work with a Pacific Islander population as effectively. We're also then want to make sure we build those connections with immigrant populations, so when there's an employer ready, we have a direct connection with underemployed individuals who can get that well-paying, family-supporting job. And we want to hold an employer symposium where we can bring employers together and discuss these options. So that's some kind of work that's moving forward in that area. I want to move now on to housing, which I think is something that's been on a lot of our minds, which is why I want to talk about this. I think if I had a magic bullet for solving housing problems, I would probably, we would be implementing that a lot more. It's obviously advocate and build more affordable housing, which is a big challenge. But there are some other elements that specifically relate to immigrant populations that we found might be useful things to be able to consider. So when you think of housing in immigrant populations, right, we have a lack of affordable housing within our region. And immigrants rely often on word of mouth in order to be able to find that housing. It's the landlords they trust. It's the landlords who, provide housing to relatives and family members. That's how they learn. It's not necessarily through Zillow or apartments.com, right? And so what that does is it takes a limited pool of housing and it shrinks it even farther, so there is even a further limit. In addition, you now have communication and trust barriers with landlords that often come from cultural and linguistic differences. And what these barriers can do is lead to sources of conflict at times. Also, these are our fastest growing populations, so when a new family moves into the region, they might move in with a relative for a little while, creating overpopulation, which leads to more conflict, and landlords being more willing to kind of launch eviction processes, right, and procedures as they're having challenge with tenants. So what this basically means is this is a major challenge for affordable housing, and it's something that we've seen recently with a number of immigrant populations struggling to be able to retain housing and to be able to get into new, good, high-quality, affordable housing. So one recommendation, one option that we looked at here was around immigrant housing allied coalitions. So like we said, there's a series of conflicts that come from rent payments or just they're too noisy sometimes, right? We can't communicate well, that lead to tension and conflict between immigrant tenants and landlords. There's actually some models that we found that were being used in, for example, Colorado around support for domestic violence survivors. When a domestic violence survivor were to leave a shelter and move into new housing, they would have support personnel who could help as that trust and communication go-between to really help with the housing situation. It really struck us that isn't this something that could work with immigrant populations as well? If you had trusted individuals with language experience who could act as an additional go-between and support, could you avoid a lot of that tension that leads to people being unnecessarily evicted and losing their housing? This could also help with finding new housing as well, as now you have additional people looking for housing when that comes up. Again, this isn't a solution for the affordable housing crisis that we find in our region, but might be the kind of solution that could help address some of the concerns for immigrant populations. And finally, I want to touch a little bit on education, because this is a new area that we're really looking into. And right now, one of the recommendations that we're focused on is addressing chronic absenteeism. So chronic absenteeism is when a student misses at least 10% of their school days during a year. And it's considered one of the leading indicators of lower academic performances and challenges graduating, reading proficiency, and a number of other important indicators, right? If students, especially lower income students, aren't in school, there's going to be an increased gap that we see. That means that they're not going to be able to academically succeed, which is going to lead to economic challenges later on the road. So right here I pulled the Maquoketa Valley Community School District in the West Delaware County Community School District. So for Maquoketa Valley, there wasn't any findings, or there wasn't information around the Hispanic population because it was a smaller degree. But you can see here that pre-pandemic to now, it jumped from 10% up to 16.4%. And for lower socioeconomic status students, it went all the way up to nearly 30% of students are now chronically absent. And then for the West Delaware County Community School District, again, for all students, it jumped from 12.4 to 19.4%. And for our Hispanic students, it's over 20%, which nationally is considered kind of a highly concerning level. This is a national problem, something that we're seeing all over, but it is something that impacts immigrant populations specifically. So kind of like I said, a study in Utah found a 7 times increase in likelihood of dropping out for students who were chronically absent. And it has been linked to worse outcomes for poverty, health outcomes, and other effects later down the road. There's an additional barrier for immigrant students who might lack a connection with the school that they are staying in, right? This disconnect leads to increased absenteeism. Also, cultural differences can lead to absenteeism. I know in Dubuque, where we have a large Marshallese population, it's not uncommon for Marshallese students back in the Marshall Islands to be taken out of school for a year, right? And parents will say, oh, we'll take you out, you'll just go to school next year. Doesn't work the same way in Northeast Iowa. And in addition to that, really, we're seeing some of this chronic absenteeism through a lot of different students, but it's those low socioeconomic students, lower income students, who have the most difficult time rebounding from a lack of attendance in schools. That's where you see the gap really grow and grow. And like we saw, there are higher poverty rates within immigrant communities. So some of the work that we have underway, we've actually partnered with the University of Iowa Community Empowerment Law Project, so students from the law school at University of Iowa who are just right now finalizing a report around chronic absenteeism in some of our immigrant populations within Dubuque. And looking at how can we bring students and school administration and teachers together so that there's a little bit more of that cultural connection between them. How can we do more student engagement activities and really get students invested in the work? We're really focusing on Pacific Islanders right now because in the Dubuque Community School District, our Marshallese population, chronic absenteeism is currently at 77% of the student body. So nearly 4 out of every 5 students are chronically absent. And then also developing welcoming baskets and other information for new families who are coming into the community. Now, when I say work is underway, what do I mean, right? And this is kind of the last thing that I want to talk about is the idea of collaboration within a community. Because one of the findings we found was we looked at who is working together, right, in communities. Well, we had specialized groups who were very focused on certain issues or certain topics like our LULAC or Dubuque Unidos or the Pacific Islander Health Project at Crescent Community Health Center. And then we had this kind of tier of general supporters. But where Dubuque specifically was missing was this strategic area, right? Were there people coming together to talk about systemic barriers that were facing immigrant populations and working together? And so what we did was in August of this past year, we launched the Better Together Committee, which actually Marla is a member of as well. This is a combination of over 60 different stakeholders who are service providers, advocates, and most importantly, members of immigrant populations who are working on a work plan. Right now, about 30% of our stakeholders come from immigrant populations. And the idea is to meet regularly and try to address some of these issues. Our first session, like I said, our first session was in August, and we have 6 focus areas right now that we are looking at, which are that assisting employers with hiring and retaining immigrant workers, as well as chronic absenteeism, and then also looking at how can our community better retain international students and get them employment opportunities within our region, because it's an area that we really struggle. Medical translation and interpretation is a huge need within our community, so our goal is to hire or to train and certify 40 community members in that who can be available for the region. Hiring additional navigators to work in systems within our region, and then finally an internal group focused on making sure that immigrants are really participating well and are feeling ownership within our community. That's a very kind of brief overview of some of the work that we're doing and some of the findings. If we have time, I'd love to take any questions or hear other thoughts or experiences that people have.
Anybody have questions? I I know I've seen this a couple of times, but it still hits me the same every time. Like I just heard it again for the first time, just because some of the stats are just kind of similar. You know that?
They are staggering.
Yeah, so it just continues every time to impact me the same way. And I'm not sure what that means for me, or that I just feel like, okay, we gotta keep doing something more, even though I know we're doing stuff, but like there's still so much work to do, I feel like, that it just hits me every time the same impact.
Especially with the kids, 4 out of 5 kids are.
It's very difficult. So I used to teach at Hempstead. I taught French for many years. I did. Yes, I taught French at Hempstead. And even then I would have some Marshallese students. And yes, if I saw them once a month, honestly, that was amazing. So this has been ongoing. And that was even, I started back in Hempstead in 2014.
So were they just not attending, or were they moving and leaving the area?
A lot of times they weren't attending, and again, this is barriers that so many of our immigrant refugee populations faces. They're expected to, take care of the other children, especially after COVID, right?
That's their
And it's also a cultural thing. Again, understanding the Marshallese Islands where they don't do time is money. Attendance is an important aspect of life, like it is here that we expect in America. They don't have those. So trying to explain, understand their culture, and again, even us in the schools as teachers explaining these are our expectations and this is why. That's a big barrier also.
Right.
I don't know if that helps with anything. But.
And honestly, I think, brain health and mental health is an ongoing issue. We see, the number of students in the Dubuque Community School District that are chronically absent has tripled overall, right? And I think that there's been some great work done around trying to work with students, but a lot of them, it was a very traumatic time that a lot of people have gone through, and we kind of want to move on and kind of start fresh and anew, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, especially with immigrant populations. We brought together Marshallese leaders to talk about this chronic absenteeism. One of the first things that was brought up for people of why are students not going, they said bullying, right? It was one of the initial things that was brought up. And I think depression and anxiety are also big reasons for that, partially because we don't have culturally competent brain health services for Marshallese students within the school district. People are not going to engage in the same way. Those students aren't going to culturally that, maybe my kids would be able to. And so the question is, are we meeting those students in a way where they can get some of that support in a way that they're going to be able to respond to, or are they falling through the cracks?
But I'm glad you said it, because when we were at the Dubuque one, and there's some students that came to talk to us, Marshallese students, I believe, and one of them is now homeschooled. And I think she said it was because part of it was the family stuff, but some bullying and stuff like that was going on. And it was just a benefit for her to do it homeschooling. But she came in, she came and talked to us about that with her teacher and stuff too. But it was very interesting. But there are also success stories too. Like they were able to make it work. But I also think someone else has said at one point that part of the culture, Marshallese and others, is to also go back to their home country for like 2 to 4 weeks at a time, right? So sometimes
Or for like a funeral.
They're not just there for 2 days. They're there for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because it's a family thing, and it may not be like their grandparent. It might have been their uncle, like 2 times down or something, like that, because that's just to them, it's all family. So they're gone long chunks of time as well. So then that all adds up, right?
And that's with our adult community also. My students, they'll be like, oh, we're going to be gone for the next month or 6 weeks. We're going back to Mexico to see her. So even not as much as the Marshallese, it's so many of our immigrant refugee populations, they try to go back home. They try to visit family, whether it's visit family or take care of someone or make sure the money gets back to them, those types of things. So then we have the adults, in my classes, they're going, so of course they're holding their children and things too. So.
And so then the question becomes not how can you get them to stop doing that, because it's, beautiful, I mean, it makes a lot of sense in ways.
Yeah.
But are there things that you can do within the school district or within employers, right, to be able to compensate for that, so you don't have people running into the, oh, you were out of school for a week, so, you're now a week behind all of your courses and you don't know how to be able to catch up and you're just gonna fall farther and farther, to, being able to make some kind of accommodation or at least approach it in a way where those students can come back and start succeeding again. Yeah? Well, anyway, are we at a point where we need to...
You can eat your food.
Well, thank you all very much. If there are any other questions or anything, also feel free to reach out to me or, let me know.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, we have,
These are huge, yes, and so we have,
okay.
no, I'm gonna take my recording stand.
Yeah.
I go? Are you ready? Okay. All right, so I get excited every time I hear what Alex has to say. From the very first time I heard him share some of the statistics about what's going on in the state of Iowa with immigration and the benefits and the value of building our immigration or immigrant populations. I mean, from the first time I saw it, I was like, we are so looking at the right things up in this part of the state, and so it's also very validating. Karen McWilliams is here with me today. She's one of our lead volunteers, which helps with a bunch of our volunteer groups and directly involved and engaged with, I think, pretty much all of the families. But her and I talked on the way down here, and literally as we sat down for this break, we were talking about how much Alex hit on the very things that we talked about on the way down here. So it's just a privilege to be able to present with Alex, and I appreciate the invitation to come here and talk to all of you. Before I get into the presentation, though, I do want to make sure, because I feel like I don't always remember to do this, I want to make sure that I share with you sort of what my personal intent is for this presentation. And that is to share a little bit about what we've done in Clinton County with respect to welcoming Ukrainian immigrants to our community and the success that's followed, but to also not forget to let all of you know that if this is something that your communities are interested in doing more of or interested in sort of duplicating in some way, we're here to help support you all doing that. One of the I think foundational messages I hope you take away from my presentation is that it's not only possible, but it's really rewarding to help these immigrant populations to resettle here in Iowa. It can be done. We've been through a huge learning curve, but you all don't have to go through that same learning curve. We've already done it, and we've recently helped another community out in Jefferson, Iowa, Greene County. We've helped them we kind of started out with a presentation like we're going to do today, and then after that, our team has been working with their team in a series of meetings to share sort of our cookie cutter approach. There's no reason to go back through the learning curve. We'll show you what we've done, how we've done it. We'll share our processes. We'll show our timelines, our maps, keys to success, lessons learned. We'll do all of that. Our organization is planning, in all likelihood, to kind of slow down the work that we're doing in the next 12 months or so. It's always been our intention to then shift our energy towards helping other communities to do the same. So I feel like I don't always remember to share that at the end of my presentation, so I'm sharing it up front this time. If this is something you're interested in doing, make sure you reach back out to Tricia, let her know. We will make sure that your community can have a running start on this and not take as long as we did to get going. So with that, again, my name is Angela Boelens. I am the president and founder of Iowa NICE. I more consider myself the coordinator of generosity than anything. My real job is I'm a full-time professor at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. This is an organization that was formed really as a response to a generous community. It was not a plan. And so what I'm going to do is to share with you a little bit about the background, and this is really kind of the emotional side of it in many ways. We'll let you know a little bit about how we got started, hopefully help you connect just a little bit with a few of the families that we've helped. And then we'll kind of just share with you what our journey has been. And ultimately, I'd like to share with you what I think, and maybe Karen can help corroborate my take on this, but I think what the keys to success have been. So, I do have some background slides in here, a little bit about the conflict in Russia. We all know that this conflict did not just start in February of 2021 or 2022. It started in 2014 with the Russian invasion of Crimea. They started taking space there. We talked to our Ukrainian friends continuously, and they all know that this will continue. They're close to it, right? So it's not just Crimea, it's not just going to be parts of Ukraine, it's going to be Poland, it's going to be, all of those 14 or 15 different republics that formed the USSR initially, they're all potential places for Putin to continue his efforts. But when the war did start, we all were watching it on television, and like all of you, I had a big place in my heart watching those families that were devastated. Putin's on the news saying, oh, nothing to see here, just a little military operation. But we know that the children saw too much. We know that now, especially as we're visiting with the families that we've helped to get out of Ukraine. I put a few little stats in the corner there, but at this point we have confirmation that at least 19,500 children alone have been taken from the country of Ukraine by force to Russia. The devastation is much worse, I think many people here are aware of. We're getting continual messages from our families asking for help. I'll tell you, back in when the war first started, there was a lot of people looking for help, and then our organization kind of got up and running. We brought a lot of families to our community, and then they started kind of pushing back. Things were looking pretty good in Ukraine, and we even had some families that we were planning to bring here, and they're like, no, we're doing okay, we're going to stay, we're going to battle it out, things are getting better. And primarily due to a lack of continuous support in Ukraine, and just over time losing a lot of their resources and whatnot, it's started to become very difficult. I know that the new aid package has been passed. It might be a little too late in some respects, but the families are now desperate, and I am getting emails literally daily from family of family saying, can you please help? I mean, they're literally in our backyard. So I put a little bit of information here about some of the situations going on. I do want to let you know that all the photos and videos that you see, unless they're marked as a different source, these are from our families. These are real people, real family photos. The photo on the right is the neighborhood of one of our families a couple nights before they were able to get on a plane and come to the U.S. I think there was, forget if it was 6 or 8 children that perished in that neighborhood. On the left is a photo of one of the shelters where one of our first families stayed for about 5 months. It's 50 degrees, but they stayed in an underground bunker in Kharkiv City, which is on the easternmost side of Ukraine, and it was the original capital of Ukraine. But for 5 months they were underground before getting to the United States. When they got invaded, you all know it's just a miraculous story. Everyone expected Ukraine to crumble immediately, but the families geared up, and these are actual family members of our friends from Ukraine, and they fought hard, and they continue to fight. Some of them have been very lucky in that they've only been injured. This is Liana Lipochenko. Her dad, I'm really not great with all of the Ukrainian names, but this is her dad. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks after his military base in southern Ukraine was hit by missiles. So this is recent. You can see he's got a black eye there, but he did survive. This young man is the fiance of Christina Kravchuk, another one of the young ladies that we sponsored. He was not as lucky. He was a decorated war hero, and he did perish in the war. And so our organization did some work to try to get her back to Ukraine so she could at least attend the funeral. But again, many have been lost, and this has really devastated the country of Ukraine, and it continues to be really bad, in spite of the fact that we don't have some military aid going there. The world did respond, and I have a bunch of notes here. I'm not going to go through them, but You know, in 1991, they had the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The world kind of promised, if you get rid of your nuclear stuff, we'll protect you. So a lot of little facts I think a lot of Americans don't really realize. So I put some of those things in the sidelines, and I'm happy to share in the sidebars. Happy to share the presentation if y'all want to read more thoroughly. But the world has responded, fortunately, both in terms of bilateral aid for the buildup of their military weaponry and things like that, but also in terms of accepting refugees and people displaced from their homes. This is a graphic that shows a lot of the countries that provided military assistance. See the little arrow there? There's the United States. Now, that's not, I can see that, it's difficult. That little black one, that's the United States. And that's a chart showing aid given to the country of Ukraine as a percentage of gross domestic product. If we were only looking at dollars, the United States bar is huge, right? It's the biggest single bar on there. But as a percentage of gross domestic product, that was important to provide a bit of perspective. But as I said, the world has been responding. They also responded in terms of taking refugee families, families coming out of Ukraine. And so this is a graphic, again, shows a lot of countries and the number of refugees per 1,000 inhabitants. Different ways that we look at things, right? But in terms of per inhabitant, you can see at the top Estonia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia. The United States doesn't show up because we're quite far down. And this is refugees overall. This is not just Ukrainian, this is refugees overall. If we're looking at refugees or displaced people from Ukraine, it actually looks quite similar. The United States to this point has accepted roughly 200,000 people from the country of Ukraine. The numbers that we are accepting on a monthly basis has dropped dramatically since we first started the Uniting for Ukraine program. But the United States, we showed up. We showed up to help Ukraine, as did many other countries. Again, the numbers are too small to see here, but this kind of shares some of the countries that are really, really stepping up. The United States is in there as well. But the United States came up with the Uniting for Ukraine program. If you've not heard of it, it was basically a program designed to fast track the ability to get people here from Ukraine. The traditional process through immigration services can be months. I know you've heard stories, it can be years if they're applying as an asylee. Well, these folks didn't have that amount of time. So U4U is a program where we match a sponsor who promises to help that family financially for 24 months, and they sort of really fairly quickly process those applications to help those people get here to the United States under a classification called Ukrainian humanitarian parole. Gives them the right and the ability to stay here for 24 months. The sponsor, in most cases for our organization, that's me, with the help of our entire organization. But we agree to help them for about 24 months, and then after that point, it's assumed that they're going back. However, in April, they did renew that status, much like a temporary protected status, or TPS, which you hear a lot about. It does automatically renew for certain countries. Ukraine is now automatically renewing those, so we expect these families to be here for a very long time. But that's the program that was put in place to help these families. Now there's a lot of non-government organizations that are helping with immigrants, whether they're coming across the southern border or whether they're from Ukraine. World Relief, the American Red Cross, Catholic Charities, LSI, I can go on. And they're wonderful organizations. We've worked with a number of them to get information, most specifically. But I do want to point out that Iowa Nice is a little different, and this is one of the reasons that we've been discussed in Des Moines at the Capitol a number of times, and have been invited to come and talk to many communities about what we're doing. So just real briefly to share with you what's a little different here. Most of these organizations, I know you're familiar with them, are funded largely or entirely by the government to provide sort of like counseling, navigation services. So an immigrant family can come to this organization and say, hey, I need help with housing, I need help with, whatever, food security and whatnot. And these organizations will help them. They will point them in the direction of here's where you go if you want to get Medicare, Medicaid, here's where you go to sign up for food stamps, here's where you go to get affordable housing, and here's the various resources. Our organization kind of proactively works with individual families prior to them coming here. So we have a 3-phase approach. We start out by understanding what are you going to need when you get here, what do you have and what are you going to need, and we plan ahead. So when they arrive here, they get into what's called our transitional phase. And during the transitional phase, they're given, and so we don't point them to organizations, we actually provide this directly without any government funding. We're 100% volunteer, we have no paid staff, 100% community supported. But when they arrive, they go into a transitional phase during which time they're given a house that's full of food. They're given temporary transportation, and they're matched up with a number of volunteers. Karen McWilliams here with me today is one of those volunteers. But we take a holistic approach using subject matter experts on our own board, our own committee. Each expert has become very, very good and efficient at helping families with the different things they need to fully integrate into our communities. So Karen, as an example, takes care of all non-cash donations, furniture, things that the community gives us. She'll set up housing, make sure that they have everything that they need day one when they arrive. And the list goes on. Now, she also, being a retired nurse, helps them get primary care set up. We have an individual who actually also works for Health and Human Services. So she will get them signed up for Medicaid, which is, by the way, the only government benefit that we use for our families. They are eligible for refugee cash assistance. They're eligible for SNAP and some things like that. We do not use any of those services. We've learned over time that it's not in our best interest to do that, and I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But so Karen sets up the housing. We have a person who gets all the kids registered for school. We have a gal who does all the Medicaid enrollments. We have people that help with the legal aspects of getting biometric screening and social security cards and work authorizations. And so anyway, we sort of divide and conquer, and each of us has become really good at doing what we do, so that when a family comes into the United States, our families, we don't need to tell them, go talk to this person for that, this person for that. We literally walk them through it. 100% of our families, after arriving in the United States, is 100% financially independent, no help from us, within 90 days. I think we actually have one exception to that. They have a special needs daughter. It took a little longer than the others. But they get here and we give them housing and, like I said, all of these things that they need to become successful, financially independent.
And I just want to add, when we say housing, it means the beds are made, there's toothbrushes, everything in the house so they can function day one 100% like you would at home.
Yeah, we get them from the airport. When they get home, there's a hot meal on the counter. That one of my favorite memories is little Karina. And she walks into her bedroom, and it's not all new stuff, right? It's donated stuff. But it had a pretty little quilt, and she walks into the room, and a lot of these families have come out of places where they maybe were in Poland or Germany or Amsterdam or whatever for some period of time. But she walks in, she picks up the quilt, and she smells it. And of course, it smells like Downy, because we always, we put the love into it, right? And she's like, "Is this for me?" And and you see the little tears, and they're really special moments. But it's a very different situation than a family who comes into the country without somebody to greet them and says, "Now where do I go? How do I get housing?" And then they have to navigate all of these systems. For those of you who work with workforce development or wherever, you know what I'm talking about. The forms, the enrollments, the things you have to do to maintain those benefits. It's not easy, even for people like Karen and I, who I think we both consider ourselves at least average intelligence. And I'm telling you, I mean, the first few times that we tried to go through and we used all those services for the first family or two, and then we kind of figured it out. But the first few times that we did it, I mean, it was tough. It was a real challenge. So anyway, so like I said, we have a 3-phase approach. We work with them pretty closely before they get here to know what they need. Once they get here, they go into a transitional phase. We stay pretty close with that family, helping them along the way, monitoring their budget, and then they go into self-sufficiency. And at that point, we help them find their permanent house. We help them, with their budget and continued integration in the community, right? So that's a little how we're different. We directly provide the support. We don't refer out. So now I'm going to share just a little bit about our journey, if you will. As I said, I was watching like everybody else. I had been asking, how can I help? for a few months, and finally somebody at my office said, hey, I know this family, they need some help, they have a special needs daughter. And I was like, awesome. And it turns out the way to connect with this family is through an organization called welcome.us. And it's kind of like a matchmaking service where families that are looking for a sponsor go, and sponsors who are looking for a family go, they connect. And hopefully you find a family that makes sense for you to sponsor. But I connected first with Anna and Pasha Zakharchenko. It probably is too small print to read, but I'll read it for you. They have 2 children. Pasha was 12, Sophia 6. But they had 15 minutes when the bombs started dropping. They grabbed their suitcases and they took off out of their apartment, which the dad had built from the ground up. Beautiful 3-story, looks like it's an architectural digest, kind of a home. All of their life savings and acquired wealth are in this home, but they leave. They got 15 minutes. They head out to a small village outside of Kyiv, is the capital city of Ukraine, central to the country. They head out there, and Pasha's like, I'm going back to protect my home. He's a big guy. He's like, I'm not leaving this. He goes back. Him and Anna had quite a bit of conflict. Had a lot of conversations with Anna about this, and kind of got to know their situation. But as Pasha got back to his home in Kyiv, as he pulled up, a rocket landed on the home next to theirs, exploded and killed a family of 8. Said his car lifted up about a foot off the ground. And he decided not to go into the house. He immediately turned around, went back to collect his family. From there, they went into Amsterdam, where Pasha was given an 8-month contract in exchange for housing. During that time is when I connected with Anna. We started filling out the uses paperwork, the affidavits, and that's a long process. But we went through that process, and right before they were coming, Anna sent me this video, and I did not test the audio, so if it doesn't work, we're going to skip it. But she sent me this video, which is really a compilation of a bunch of photographs that she had taken. The first few are from before the war started. You'll see it's right before Valentine's Day. You'll see some rockets come down, and then there's a bunch of photos that just sort of photo journal her trip out of Ukraine across country and to Amsterdam. The video kind of ends abruptly, and I apologize for that, but this is just what she sent me. Of course, we're not going to have sound, so it doesn't work, but you'll see the photos anyway. So this is before the war in their home in Ukraine. You'll see the rockets flying here in a second. There's the rockets over the buildings in their neighborhood. So they hop in the car, and you can picture yourself in the car, right? This is the family looking out the window in the various. Anyway, I wonder if there's someone. In any case, this is just different photos. What you can't see because it's too small here is the buildings. A lot of the windows are blown out of these buildings as they were traveling across the countryside. But that was that's where they were. She sent me this video, and I had a house in Rock Island that I was getting ready to sell. It's actually a house that has 2 kitchens, 2 bedrooms, or actually several bedrooms, 2 laundry rooms. It's capable of taking 2 families, and I thought, well, I'll just have them stay in this house instead of selling the house immediately. We'll have a family live there until they can be on their own. And so that's kind of what I did. Now, while I was waiting for their application to be processed, so let me just tell you this, anyone, and by the way, I was one of them. For many, many years, I was one of those people who would always say, just come here legally. Just be legal. I mean, we like to have you here, but please be legal. You don't know what you don't know, right? This system is not easy. And if you make a single typo, your application doesn't just stop. You'll never hear back. There is no phone line that you can get on and call somebody and say, hey, how's my application? There's not even a live person that you can get to. It will literally hang up on you after 59 minutes. You can call as many times as you want. You cannot get through to people. You're allowed 1 email question. You're not told how long you'll get an answer back on it. If you try to write a second email, it says, sorry, you've already hit your limit. You can only add 1 email until you get an answer on the first one. It's really bad, you guys. That U.S. That bill that we have right now that's out there for border protection includes a lot of funding to help this process, to hire enough people so that these applications go a lot faster. Right now it's about 6 years wait on asylee applications. Part of the reason I think, and I'm not an expert on this space, but when we first applied for like Anna, I think it was maybe a couple months waiting. The Gitamanova family, which I'm going to tell you about next, theirs was a little bit faster. But still, we were able to get people processed in, 3-4 weeks, generally speaking. We're now out to like 5 months. And I think one of the reasons for that is that this program actually is so successful that they've expanded it. And the general idea of the I-134, for those who are familiar, that's the financial affidavit, it's now I-134A, now includes the ability for people from Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti. There's actually 8 countries now. So we've increased the number of countries, we've not hired more people, and we've extended the application. I now have a minimum of 750-word essay I have to write for every single individual in a family, explaining why that family should qualify or warrants us sponsoring them.
And who's actually reading those?
Right. And the more
It's
they
just another step.
right. And so now we have to like show the appraised value of our home and proof that we don't owe anything in our home and proof of all these financial assets. And the more they ask for, the longer it takes to process. Now we've got more countries. They brought 2,200 people in on average per month when this program started, and I believe they're down to 85 per month. So think from Ukraine anyway. So many more, of course, when you add the other countries. But this is why our families are now waiting 5-6 months. What they're ending up doing now is they're coming in through places like Canada. Most of the other countries that are accepting refugees, their process for accepting people is, if you're from Ukraine and you have a passport, come. There's no dumping, there's none of this. So they're going to other countries to wait in safety until the United States can get things processed. But in any case, while I was waiting for Anna, what I didn't realize is when I went on this Welcome.us page that I was going to be publicly visible. And so another family contacted me. I know, I had no idea. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know.
Well, so this gal, Alona, who's here up here in the corner, can you help my family? And she's the one actually living in this underground bunker. Her mother was a recent widow and had a stroke recently. Their family's home and business was flattened. They were in Kharkiv city, which was really heavily hit by the Russian military. They were, literally living underground for about 5 months. I, at this point, understood that a single typo was going to hang things up, and I remember spending time with Olana, double checking every single letter in this application. Nothing can be wrong. It has to be perfect, or else it might be delayed. She called me at 3 o'clock in the morning one day, and she was crying, and I'm like, "What's going on? What's wrong?" She's like, "It's all wrong. I'm so sorry. It's all wrong. We had to go, and we had to go now." I'm like, "What do you mean you had to go?" And she's like, "The roads were being blocked off, and they were and the families literally were not going to be safe in these circumstances again, so they picked up and they had to leave. They actually ended up leaving through Russia, through the country of Russia was the only route out because all the roads were blocked. So their story is pretty traumatic, but I said to Alona, I'm like, listen, if it's that bad, no one's checking your address, just go, call me when you're safe. And then for 3 nights, absolutely was traumatized and just, scared to death something had happened. They eventually did get through. They got to Istanbul where they contacted me and eventually they arrived. In fact, they arrived before my first family. Theirs got processed. So second to apply, first to arrive. But I tell you the process, it's not easy, and yet still it's easy. And it's easy because when you're laying in bed at night, knowing that every minute, every hour that you delay in taking care of that family could be the difference between them making it or not making it, this doesn't seem that bad. It's worth every single moment of waiting and worrying. It just is. So the Jibba family arrived. They're actually the first to arrive on October 16th of 2022, and they were in my Rock Island home. I live in DeWitt, Iowa, but they came up to the DeWitt house one day and spent from 7 a.m. until about 6 o'clock in the evening, Grandma and the little girl sitting on the sofa in my living room while I sat with Mom and Dad, who spoke very little English. But we did our Social Security card application, work authorization application, Health and Human Services, registering for all of these different things. And all the while, they don't really know me, but they're trusting me, and it's exhausting. And at the end of the day, we were just, that physical exhaustion, you almost feel like you're in tears, and we're like, all right, it's time to head back to Rock Island. And we all got up, and we walked out, and I don't know if you can see it in here, but this lower left-hand corner, the biggest, most beautiful, perfect rainbow I've ever seen in my life. And it was just it was a real defining moment for me, and I think for the family, and the mood's kind of uplifted, and you can see their little girl, Sophia, very excited. We snapped a few photos, and we proceeded to get in the car and head south on 61 down to Rock Island. That's a photograph of them in front of my Rock Island house. It was fall, it was just beautiful. Anyway, so we head on 61 towards Rock Island, and I had turned down the music to Somewhere Over the Rainbow, thinking that would be kind of fun, right? So, but it was all happiness, and the mood had uplifted, and suddenly I noticed everyone was really quiet. Like nobody was talking, and I'm like, what's going on? I looked around, and there was all these tears, and they're all crying. And Maxim, the dad, was sitting next to me, and he holds up his phone, and he shows me this photo with the flag down here. I drive by that flag every single day on the way to work and every day on the way back.
Huge
It's a
flag on
huge
fire,
flag.
huge, yes.
Yeah, I drive by it all the time. And I know, Alex and Tricia have heard this before, but the flag is really important to my family. My son actually took third place in a flag essay contest in the state of Iowa, right? I mean, it matters to us, and we care deeply about what it means and represents to us. And yet at that moment, he shares this photograph with me, and he said, Angel, this is a day and a moment we will never forget the rest of our lives. And I looked at that photograph, and I saw that flag through their eyes. And it has an entirely different meaning when you look at it through their eyes. So it's one of those moments, that tell you and make you know for sure that every effort, every night that you stay up late worrying, every time that you don't pick up your kid from school because you're off doing something for one of these, it's worth it. And this is God's work. So going back now to the second family, they arrived on, I think, November 2nd. I had told Anna, please send me a photograph when you're on the plane. And she was so excited to be coming, finally approved, right? And I said, send me a photograph, and you can see the looks on their faces. I put that up here because, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Very excited to be approved to come here, but that night she had to say goodbye to her parents and her friends, and everything that she had known and worked for, all her dreams, everything, to come to a place where she doesn't know the other family. These guys are from Kyiv, and their suitcases, 4 of them. What do you put in the suitcase, right? For me, it's going to be shoes. For them, right? For them, the dads give up their suitcase to the moms. The moms use their suitcase for memorabilia, kids' Christmas ornaments, and all those things that are irreplaceable, right? But this is the day Anna knew it was going to be okay. You'll notice in this upper right-hand corner, this Olona. So our first family goes up to Chicago to greet and welcome the next family, right? So they're paying it forward, and now we have this little support network of people in our community. Since that time, it's kind of history. It's a few of the additional families that have come here. Since 2022, we've, I think, received about 50 individuals plus. I think we've got another, maybe 6 to 8 in the pipeline. Lots of kids, pets, all that sort of thing. But this was just it started out myself personally going to help 2 families. I have a house, like I said, that can take 2 families. But then the third family contacted me, and I'm like, oh, what do I do? So I stopped into Dubuque Bank and Trust, and I asked Greg Gannon's the president of that bank. I thought, maybe he knows of somebody who has a farm with a house that's not being used. Maybe there's another house somewhere. And I went in and asked him that question just kind of on a whim. I stopped in, and he was like, well, I'll give it some thought. And he really didn't say much. And I thought at the time, I probably overstepped here a little bit. It was probably inappropriate for me to be stopping in unannounced in my shorts and ponytail to ask him about a house, and because he was really quiet. It turns out that he was quiet because I think it was really a meaningful and special moment for him. Him and his wife had been talking the day before about what could they do to help Ukrainians. And anyway, just a few days later, he contacted me and he said, Angela, we've raised about nearly $500,000 to buy you some houses with an investor group, right? But we're going to buy you houses because housing is a problem. Not only is it expensive, but it's not available in our community. And so that was the point really where we kind of decided, okay, and I have a lot of years of experience on boards, and you've got a fiduciary responsibility to do things a little differently when you're dealing with community funds like that. So that's when the not-for-profit kind of was initiated, so that we could handle those funds a little better. We did not go out and ask for money. Our community heard what we were doing. They met a couple of these people, and people came to us. People came to us by the masses. I don't think there's a parish, and Karen will have to validate this for me, I don't think there's a parish or a church in town that has not come to us and said, can we provide, can we help you clean houses? Can we help you with the yard work? Can we help with, consumables? Can we give you furniture? What can we do? Our community has stepped up in a way I would never have guessed. Like I said, we don't have a fundraising arm, we don't have a marketing arm, nothing like that. It's just our community. It's why I call myself the coordinator of generosity. It's Iowa Nice. Iowa Nice, by the way, is not just an idea, which I think that we really exemplify in our little community. It stands for Newcomer Integration Community and Exchange. There's actually a meaning behind it. Logo developed by my students at Augustana incidentally. But yeah, I asked for a house, I got Nice Properties. That's the name of the organization that was formed to provide us with housing. We also have housing provided to us by a couple other individuals, as well as Genesis Medical Center has stepped up in a huge way. Their chief nursing executive is on our board of directors. Eastern Iowa Community College, their executive director for their foundation, Ann Eisman, is the vice president of our board. We have the 27-year mayor, Don Filgen, is on our board of directors. We've got Karen McWilliams, who's on parish council for St. Joe's Catholic Church, retired nurse with all kinds of expertise and connections. We've got an AEA retired person who handles all of our education. We've got ELA teachers who teach our people in person on missing people, but the community just stepped up in a huge way. So this is just a little visual of the community impact and engagement. We've got sponsor families, and in most of the cases that's me, but I now have some additional people doing the legal sponsorship. We're very connected to the school. Before we bring in new families, we want to make sure our school has the resources. Like, we don't want to put too many kids in one classroom. We don't want to overwhelm them. Incidentally, if you go to Central DeWitt's webpage, there's a little button in the corner. You click it, and it all turns to Ukrainian for us. Our school has been incredible with welcoming and helping to integrate these kids. But again, we've got temporary housing. Local businesses have all kind of stepped up, not just with donations and so forth, but also in helping with employment, right? A community, one of the things that's really cool about our group is that they're paying it forward. We talk about the unexpected benefits of welcoming these folks. When we have the firemen's group doing a pancake breakfast, these guys all show up. I was out of town the other day, but were you at the firemen's?
I didn't make it to it, but I saw the picture.
You saw the
of all
photos.
there, yeah.
They show up. If you need something taken care of, they show up. When I have a new family coming and we've only got 2 days to get a house ready, we make a phone call, they show up. The Knights of Columbus used to do the furniture collection. Now our guys do the furniture collection, right? They're paying it forward. So it's really been a pretty cool experience for us. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we, again, take a real holistic approach. They've got one point of contact, or two. It's usually between Karen and I. Anything that they need, mental health care, dental services, medical. Our CNE is set it up so that they don't have to wait months for a new patient appointment. They get it like the same week. So that first family I told you about, with SNAP and all the different promise jobs and all the different things we did, 4 months for me to get them through all of those basic processes. We've got that down to 2 weeks because we know what we're doing when we're fast. We no longer do, and I said I'd come back to this topic, these government benefits are wonderful. SNAP is just a fantastic program, but guess what? The amount of time it takes me to sit there, fill out the paperwork, then follow up and get the proof, and then do the promised jobs interview, and then this and then that, and whatever. If I take all those hours that we spend doing that and translating to get it done, and I just simply get them a job, we're like that. We do not have the time and the resources to get, some of the benefits that are sort of a temporary solution until they get a job, at which point they don't qualify anyway. So one of the things unique about our model is that we're not using government benefits except Medicaid for the children. That is still incredibly critical for us. But they're just financial. Most of these guys are making more money than I am. And again, I'm a professor, right? But they do great. And they do great because we make sure they don't fail. It's almost like a college kid. When they graduate, we're there to make sure that they're connected in all the right places, including, like I said, transportation. We figure it takes about $36,000 during a 12-month period to take care of a family of 4. And you kind of see some of the breakdown with rent and so forth. But we're able to get them through that first 3 months, and that's really about all it takes before they're able to take care of themselves. So what does that do for our community? It gives us, first and foremost, it's I believe it's God's work, and it feels really good to us. Those of us who are close to it, it feels really good to us. It's good for our friends from Ukraine, but it's also really good for the community because not everybody has money to give. A lot of people just want to give of themselves. This is an opportunity for them to be directly involved and take a lot of pride in what we're doing. So this has become a huge source of pride. We met with Nikki Haley 2 times to talk to her about how important these communities are in our area, right? It gives people that connection, right? They really, they care about it. Not only that, guys, but I think somewhere on one of these slides I've got some of the stats, but we just closed on our 4th home. And these are not inexpensive homes. These are like, $300,000 homes. So what they are doing for our economy, what they're doing for our workforce, what they're doing for diversity in our school, the tax base, it's incredible. Our little community isn't putting out big, advertisements saying, hey, check out our community. We've got cute shops, but we're growing, and we're growing faster than most of the communities in our area. And it's in all the right ways with young, hardworking families and children, and it's just become a real source of pride. And these are the things we didn't expect. We didn't set out to do this, but if you're looking to grow your community, as Alex said, it's all about welcoming people. And one of the interesting things, I also was talking to Karen about this on the way here, but Alex has got the work of figuring out, how do we kind of overcome some of the challenges that communities typically face when it comes to the immigrant population. Our approach was a little different. We were kind of doing it before we had the problem. So it occurred to me after watching Alex's presentation a few times that we don't have a lot of the issues that Alex speaks of because we don't take sort of an accept and overcome approach. We're taking a welcome, invite, and celebrate approach. We're there for them. We don't get into those bad places because we've got things set up in advance. Our communities, they walk down the street and everyone's like, hi, can we help you, right? It's a different experience for our folks because of the way that we've kind of welcomed and celebrated the differences. There's cultural differences with all groups and even within the United States, right? We're all immigrants at some point. But taking that kind of celebrate the differences approach and having a few rainmakers or leaders in the community that really believe that has really been, I think, part of the recipes for success. I know Karen knows these folks, but we had a guy by the name of Roger Hill, heard about what we were doing fairly early on. That one gentleman, very respected in our community as a business leader, went out and talked to 3 or 4 different people, and suddenly I'm being asked to go to the Lions Club, the Rotary meetings, and the word spread like wildfire. But when you have a few individuals in the community who really believe in doing the right thing for these communities and also believe in the growth of and the beauty of these United States being in our immigrant populations, and that's who we are, right? We're a melting pot. When you have people who believe in that and support it, this is organic. It's just organic. Our success has been as a result of those individuals. A couple of the younger families. There's an adorable video that goes with little Alina here. We can't hear it here, but Alina thanks the group. Actually, you know what? I could probably get it here, but. Anyway, yeah, so these are just some of the additional people that we've sponsored. I'll see if I can play that fun little thing from Alina. Get the sound online. So this is what little Alina Afghan has sent me. You hear that? Anyway, these families are just really precious to us. Our community is providing English lessons 2 nights a week at the library for free. We've connected with Eastern Iowa Community College, who's now helped, I think, 3 of our gentlemen to get CDL licenses. One has gotten her CNA, working in Makokada, actually. We've got
She's in a Wheatland.
Oh, is it Wheatland? I'm sorry. In any case, but it's been really cool. So we've just found a way to wrap our arms around these families. And in doing so, we've also provided them with their own little community, right? So when they arrive now, they're not as scared. They can see all the different folks that have been successful. And I don't think there's a weekend that goes by that Karen and I are not asked to come to a birthday party, right. We have our first person graduating from high school soon. She also won an art contest just recently. I would pull up the Facebook page, but I was not able to on this computer. But if you do go out to our Facebook page, you'll see photographs of some of the really joyous stuff. I feel like when I look at other web pages on immigration, I see a lot of sadness. Hopefully you see mostly positive stuff on ours. We have now some funding that's dedicated specifically to children. We noticed early on that we were spending all of our time making sure the family had, jobs and food, and the children were kind of neglected a little bit because depression is a real thing. Learning the language, making friends is a real thing, right? All of it. You're right. So the children are now a little bit more of a focus than they were before. And we have some great video of little Sophia, who, by the way, took 5th place in a gymnastics competition in Waterloo recently. Her family's been financially independent for at least a year, if not more. In any case, when she first arrived here, she was able to be a part of the Miss Iowa competition. So you'll see her on stage. And we try to create positive memories from the families when they get here. They leave such horrendous circumstances that within the first week we say, what's something we can do? Most of them want to go fishing, so we have lots of fishing pictures, right? But anyway, visit our Facebook page. You'll see a lot of just really cool activities. This one down in the corner, you can see this is one of those pancake breakfasts. Little Sophia made a gingerbread house, entered it into a competition. You can see it says her name across the bottom there. Up there, sort of in the middle, the first family that bought a house here. I think that was the first family who purchased a house. We closed in another one just a few days ago, so that was exciting. This one down in the right-hand corner, that is one of our nice properties. Again, 20 investors donated, or maybe it was more than 20.
It was about
20, I think they're up now to 22 maybe, but each donated $20,000 to purchase homes for us. But this is one of them, one of our donated cars. This is one of our church groups that came together and helped us out. That's a picture of the Avidason family the first day that they arrived. Also on our webpage, you'll find we've had a lot of international, national, and local news stories that have been written, including MSNBC, the New York Times, Iowa Public Television is working on something for us. But there's a lot of really great stories and human interest stories included in those, so you can find those on our website. When we talk about the economic impact, one of the things that comes up a lot is workforce, right? So we need more skilled workers. Thought you might be interested in knowing a few of the stats. You'll notice up here, we do have a few people who are unemployed, but they're unemployed by choice at this point. If they have little children at home and the dad has already made the family financially independent, there are a few moms that are not looking for work right now or not looking for full-time work. But for the most part, everybody's working. There's an awful lot of 1099s there, you'll notice. And this gets to one of Alex's points. He talks about not being necessarily compensated for the work that they're doing. So these are guys, I've got attorneys that are painting trim, and they're doing a lot of work, right? And feel like, we would like to make more, let's put it that way. We've got people who are, came from places where they were directors of logistics in large companies for 10 years and are now making minimum wage. And so what they have found is that working independently on their own, they can do a little better job at supporting their families. Because remember, they're trying to reacquire wealth. And so a lot of them have just gone into the business for themselves, and they've got more work than they can handle. So they're doing a great job. But they're in different, you'll see the different areas of their business. One thing that I would like to see the state of Iowa do is a better job at recognizing the credentials of these folks. One example, a gentleman by the name of Vitaly Saryenko he's an instructor in pediatric emergency medicine, an instructor in wound care emergency medicine in the field, driving and gun safety, etc. and so forth. He actually trained U.S. Texas Border Patrol. They hired him to train U.S. Texas Border Patrol, and yet his credentials are not recognized in the state of Iowa. So he eventually is one of the only families of ours that literally left the state of Iowa to take a job in Tennessee, is where he ended up. But I really feel like we need to take a look at that. There's one of these gals was teaching, actually two of them were teachers in the fields of cosmetology and nail technician type. But again, one of them just tried this past week, actually two, started cosmetology school. One is passing, one had to drop. $22,000 to redo the education they used to teach.
And have been actively doing stuff for 5 or 10 years.
Right. So it might be time to relook at some of those policies within the state to see if there's some way we can help these folks get better employment faster. So I'm going to end there. But again, if your community says, you know what, I think we've got a group of people who would like to get together and do some of the things that we're doing, let us know. We're happy to help. Jefferson just welcomed their first family, I don't know, a few weeks ago. But we worked with them. They now have 4 units available for refugee families. They've got some in the pipeline. And it's going well. And we're happy to do that for other groups as well. I do think that the secret, again, is starting out from a humanitarian perspective, getting a few people in the community who really want to be a part of welcoming for the right reasons, and the economic benefits just follow. What we're doing for the school in terms of diversity and giving people the opportunity to connect, it's pretty special. And Karen, is there anything you'd like to add? Because I know Karen has just been just such a blessing. I literally don't know what we would do without Karen, but she's literally taking phone calls. If somebody has an emergent situation, Karen's the one who shows up, and I'll let you share a little.
We had a child that had been here for only a couple of weeks, and he broke his glasses. So we had to find out when his glasses were carried by the next day. Well, the small town Dubuque, I double checked with Angela to make sure they had insurance, and what insurance they're gonna get or whatever. And we were able to get him walking in within an hour into a clinic. He had brand new glasses to wear to school the next day. They said, don't worry about it, we'll send it to insurance, we'll worry about it later. That's small town too. But, yeah, they'll call and say, hey, I have a toothache, I can't hardly close my mouth. We'll get them into a dentist within a day. Finding insurance, a place where insurance will be accepted is another thing, because you're talking state insurance. In Dubuque, there's nobody in Dubuque that does dentistry that will take state insurance, except for the first 3 people that call the first of the month. So, for the Quad Cities make calls. I go to their first appointments with them, fill out their paperwork with them, introduce them to the doctors, make sure they have all of that together. I will help fill out their health histories for everything. If they put my name down as the contact for when they get results back from healthcare purposes, they will email them to me or call me, and I get back to them with them, because they don't understand English. They don't know what any of this means. And most of them are amazed at our healthcare and our dental care availability compared to what they had in Ukraine. They said this is like top of the line. Top of the line compared to what they had here. So, I don't know if we've had a single family that's upset about living in our area. They
They love it. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they don't want to go back. Their plan is they want family, but they don't want Ukraine specifically war.
Yeah, I think with the exception of just maybe like Christina and Alina.
Yes.
So I really was working more with their parents to get them here. But their parents wanted them to leave, to get them out of the country. But those little girls, I think, would like to go back to Ukraine. But the rest of the families, we asked them, would you like to stay? Would you like to go back? And they all kind of have the same theme of what they respond with, and that is, our children have seen so much and been through so much. Now that we're resettled, we're rebuilding, we're reestablishing, they think it's going to be years before they're able to move back. And then even if they could, it would be like another layer of trauma on their families. So they're all hoping for permanent citizenship, which Karen knows this too. But I'm one of those, we can do anything. It'll be fine. We'll get you citizenship. Well, I really wasn't an expert in this field. I have read through the 20 chapters of the immigration law,
I do that too.
20 chapters, 2 times. And so now I am fully aware that there is no path to citizenship for them other than some sort of a lottery if they get lucky, and they have about a 3% chance, which I think is just heartbreaking. But hopefully what we do know is that with humanitarian parole status being renewable, hopefully they'll be here as long as they would like to be. I can tell you that our community, I worried about this for a long time. I'm like, they're going to come at me with pitchforks. They love these families. And if I have to tell them, I'm sorry, time's up, they need to sell their house, sell the 14, 15 cars that we've created loans for, right? And they have to go back, I'm like, I'm going to be in deep doo-doo. So they did come out in April with that renewed 24-month stay. But I am hoping there's a bill, House Bill 3911, that's up for consideration. No, it's not up for consideration. I would like it to be up for consideration. Slightly different. But it does provide some opportunity to have a change of status and allow these families, if they can demonstrate financial stability and so on and so forth, to eventually get legal permanent status here in the United States and work towards citizenship. I think that would be wonderful. I have all kinds of ideas on that topic if anybody's interested in carrying those back to our legislators, but I think community-based sponsorship is the way we need to go. I've talked to you guys about that before, but I can tell you that it's been a blessing in my life. It's been a blessing to be working with people like Karen and others that have the same interest in helping these families, and I can tell you that I absolutely believe that what we are doing and how we are doing it would be equally as successful, whether they're from Ukraine, Venezuela, Haiti. I don't care where you're from. People don't leave your country for the heck of it. They leave for a reason, as did all of our ancestors. And I do believe that when they're welcomed with open arms by a community that values the diversity and that values everything they have to offer, any group can be successful. And so we are committed to helping others.
I have just one story that to me really caught my attention. We had a family that had 2 boys starting school. They'd come just before school started. I went out that morning, got them on the bus first day of school. Got them on the bus, told the bus driver, I'm going to be at the school to meet them so they could meet them. So I drove into town, got at the school, got them off. I walked them in, got them to their teachers. I turned around, drove back out and got the mom because it's a parochial school that they chose to go to. And I brought her back for the mass because I wanted to see the safety of everything going on. So they went to mass and she got to see all of the kids, and they locked the doors when the kids were in the church for safety. And as they're walking out of church, she goes, my children are safe. So it gets better. Goes on that day. I get a phone call about 4:15 that afternoon. It was a day from our school person had a really hard time that day. Anyway, she says, my children are on the bus. Where are my children? Oh. Well, there was a lot of commotion in busing day. We figured it out. We found them. We gained all the one that takes her to school, drove across town. It was a 102-degree day that day. All those buses ran out where they were driving around town. She took them back out and dropped them off, and I checked with her later. I said, so how's it going? She goes, I know they're safe. So she felt comfortable never meeting these bus drivers, that they were in a safer community than where they came from, because she knew there was adults watching them that they would get home. That was huge to me. They're safe, and that you could just see the relief in her face. So that was really neat. But then the next day, I asked, how's school? I don't know. My children would come home sometimes. She said,
The third day, she hopes they don't
yeah.
come.
But to me, that says a lot, because you know, us in the United States, if we don't know where our children are for 10 minutes, we're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
And they shouldn't even know this country, but she knew they were safer than they had been in Ukraine. So that was huge.
So anyway, any questions? Yes.
So it sounded like you kind of stumbled upon this by yourself, and I always thought it was an understanding that if you wanted to have those people come, you had to be like approved organization and had to have the housing, the transportation, and the financial package.
No, actually the USIS system does not recognize organizations as sponsors. They only recognize individuals, which is kind of a double-edged sword because I have to personally be the sponsor. I am the personal sponsor for, 37 people, something like that. And then we now have some additional folks that do it. But no, all that you have to do is to say you're going to make sure that they don't fail for 24 months as an individual. They actually have a calculation that they go through. You have to be with your sponsored family. So like if I'm a family of 2 and I'm sponsoring 2, that makes me a family of 4. As a family of 4, you have to be able to prove that you're at least at 130% of the poverty level in the United States for a family of 4, right? So if you can prove that, and early on the process was a little bit shorter. I just had to show a letter from my employer, a year's worth of bank records, and some things like that. It's a little bit more extensive now, so now I'm sending my house appraisal, showing that my house is paid.
Well, when you're doing 37 people, and you're
Right. Yeah, you're not able to put in an organization. Now, that said, they did update, when they went to the I-134A form, or some version, some iteration of it, they now do have a place in there where you can say, are you going to rely in part on resources from an organization, and if so, who is that organization? So now I can put in the corner, and I have to because I don't make enough money as a college professor to have a family of 40. So, so I put in Iowa Nice, and then of course they have to verify all of that stuff as well, which just slows down the process. But no, it's individuals. You're putting your name and your social security number in a form saying that I'm going to legally take care of that family. That said, I can tell you right now that there is, I'm not going to call it human trafficking, but there are unfortunately U.S. citizens who take a payment to fill out that paperwork, get the family here, and then say good luck, right? And so we've actually received at least one or two of those folks that would say, okay, now we're here, now what do we do? And so we'll still help them. But yeah, does that answer your question?
So as a business, you know, if I'm a manufacturer and I want a worker,
Mm-hmm.
and I want the husband, but I'll take the whole family, can they as a business do that? Or
No.
it has to be an individual?
It has to be an individual. So, that said, we are now to a place where, like I said, I kind of ran out of cards to play on a personal level without putting an Iowa Nice. So now we have 2 or 3 different individuals who, I don't ask them to fill out all the paperwork, but they give me the permission to use them as sponsors. They still have to sign off and everything, but I go through all the paperwork for them because I can do it with my eyes closed. And then they don't really have to do anything except that legal paperwork. In fact, if you start doing some research on it through You4You, you'll find that they have what's called like the legal sponsor and then the, like, I don't know, there's another name for the other, like the sponsor, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have to do both. So if an employer says, I really need some employees, I'd love to hire somebody to be a dad, I would make 2 comments. First of all, have them put together a little group of people who would help to make sure that family integrates fully, but also know that one of the things that we do in our early stages, anytime we help a community, is we have a informational session, a training session to make sure people understand that sponsorship is something that you do as a humanitarian, and it is about helping the family. It's not about getting an employee. So we will not allow a sponsor to provide a house and employment and sponsorship. It's too much of a power dynamic because even if the person doesn't say you have to work for me or else, these families will always say yes, okay, I'll do that. But we don't ever want somebody feeling like they're obligated to stay, obligated to work for me, or whatever. If the community is looking for employees, my suggestion would be either through your Chamber of Commerce, through church organizations, find out, is there a group of people who would like to do some of the work that like Karen and myself are doing? If so, organize around that, and then make sure that your local businesses all know that you have families that are going to be arriving and that you are there to support their success. So I don't tell the families to go fill an application. I make a resume for them. I go on their interviews with them. I sit with the employer and I say, if you need this manual translated into Ukrainian, my organization will do that for you. I just translated $147 worth of documentation for an employer so that they could onboard somebody in Ukrainian, right? So we are there to support the employer hiring somebody, the school getting the person, right? The kids, integrated, the pharmacy knows who to call if there's a question. We're there to help support the process, but we do need to have some separation, otherwise it doesn't look good at the very least.
And we've had people wanting to do that component.
Yes.
And we talked to them and they understood them saying, oh, this isn't right, we should be both the employer and their housing sponsor or whatever, so yeah.
So anytime we have somebody who does want to do sponsorship, we have meetings with them in advance to tell them, what are the expectations? These are people with different personalities and different circumstances,
and they
just
don't
like.
always agree with what I think they should agree with that's their right.
Yeah.
They're
We have
individuals.
beautiful relationships with some, and others are just like, we'd like to be independent. We don't want to go to your church and do all your things. Like we have mostly Eastern Orthodox families, but we have a Muslim family, absolutely beautiful. Each of them have different cultures. We can't expect all of them to be great friends with us. This is their lives. We're here to support them no matter what their choices. When Vitaly decided to move to Tennessee, I had to support him in that. As much as I adored that family, I had to wish them well and help them to get there, right? But we talk about that. We talk about power issues. We talk about confidentiality issues. We talk about expectations and how do you manage some of the things that come up, and things come up. Karen and I talk the whole way here about stuff, right? So we do that training, but we also help with the sort of the process map. I'm a professional project manager and an ASQ Six Sigma girl, so for me, it's just right down my alley, right? But we map it out, so we know who's doing what are the sequence of things that have to be done, what are the things you don't want to waste your time on. We can help any community do
What
it.
happens if a family doesn't follow that 24-month,
That was my question too.
you know, the qualifications that are expected of them to be part of the program?
There's no qualifications
What?
expected of them.
Well, you had said 24.
It's
Yeah,
the sponsor, it's the sponsor that
Yes.
signs that they would be.
Okay, so
Yes.
yes, what happens if you're sponsoring a family
Mhm.
and they are not upholding all they're not behaving in the manner that you
Right.
expect, or they're not
Sure,
they're
no,
not
that's a
upholding
great,
all the
yeah, that's a great question. And actually
goals,
Karen and I
like
have,
expectations.
yeah, so Karen and I had a little bit of a conversation about that. So far, we haven't had much of an issue because the families are so anxious to just get integrated. We pretty much, we interview families ahead of time, so we're kind of handpicking them to some extent. We are looking for young families that are hardworking, that we know are going to be a good fit for Iowa. I have said no to families who are all about the movies and Hollywood. They're not a good fit for us. But if I think they're a good fit, we've just been really fortunate, I think. But if a family is not actively trying to get financially independent, if they are not actively doing the right things, we're not going to support them in that. And as a financial sponsor, as a person who filled out the financial affidavit, that I-134, I am promising to help that family not basically become a ward of the state for 24 months. After that 24 months, I have no obligation. Obviously, these are my friends. We're going to try to help make sure that they remain legal. But if something were to happen during those 24 months and they were to do something that was illegal, as an example, that's not on me. I can't control that. I'm not going to be held responsible for that. If they don't seem to want to take care of themselves, and we had at least one
Do they
family.
go back to Ukraine, or are they on their own in the United States?
No, they will. Well, I mean, they will be asked to go back to Ukraine. It is the assumption. There's asylees. There's people here on TPS. There's refugees. These are all different classifications. All of ours are considered temporary, with the assumption that they'll go back, as are people here on TPS, which is temporary protected status coming up from the southern border. But for certain countries, those are automatically renewable in blocks of 18 months or 24 months. Our families qualify in that space. They don't have to go through interviews and all that to remain. But at the end of the 24 months, they're either they have to fill out some paperwork. I think it's $50 to reapply. In any case, after that paperwork, we're going to help make sure that they get that done correctly, and they can stay indefinitely at this point, is our expectation. If they don't, they will move into an illegal status. If they move into an illegal status, they then are not ever going to be allowed to become a permanent legal resident, and they will receive notice that they need to return to their country. But that's kind of part of what we take as an organization responsibility for, is making sure everyone knows when are you going to be up, and we'll help you get that paperwork filed. If they're not doing their part to become financially independent, and this is something, like I said, Karen and I were talking about on the way here, because there's differences. Some of the families are just like, they won't even take a 50-cent cup of coffee. There's other families who have been online in this Ukrainian or immigrant community and trying to figure out where are all the things I can get for free. Well, we kind of have a very basic set of values in our organization. We are not about entitlement, and we are not about indefinite just unfettered support. We're all about helping them become financially independent. And so if I have a family who is not working actively towards that, we will let them know that their free housing, or because what they do is they get a month for free. Typically, it's different for every family, but typically the house is theirs for free for the first month. The second month they pay 50%, which for us is like $250. In the third month, they would pay the full rent for transitional housing. Full rent for us is $500 a month. So we gradually move them towards financial independence. We work with them on their budget. As soon as they're able, we start helping them find permanent housing, right? But if they're not making progress towards that, if they're not allowed to stay in temporary housing indefinitely, for the same reason, we wouldn't do that we have U.S. people, right, who need help as well. Just because they're from Ukraine doesn't mean that they are indefinitely supported. And so it would not be in the best interest of our organization. Our community would not accept if we were just continuing to hand things out. And we haven't really had an issue with it. On their own, they want to be independent. And again, a lot of them are, my goodness, this last one, 30 days or less?
Yeah.
I mean, they're on their own. And now they're helping to support others, right? I mean, So we haven't had any issue with that, but if we start to feel that's a situation, we will have a frank conversation and say this. And in fact, our application process, before they ever are approved by our board to come to the United States, they are given information like, here's how our organization works. And we have
So they're very well.
they know before they come here, and they have to sign off on that and saying that they understand that this is how your program works, because it's different all over the U.S. Our model is quite different. So we
And
want to
I
make
would
sure
say
they know.
Some of the newer ones, when they come in right away, they don't fully understand. They think they have to pay that back to us, and they're
Yeah.
willing to pay it back to us.
Yeah.
So when I start paying it back, we're like, no, what we're giving you, we're giving you.
Yeah.
You work for the future and pay
Yeah.
for your own way.
Yeah.
They're willing to pay us back.
Yeah, they are. They try. So we do have a few grants. We have one grant from basically the Riverboat Commission, CCDA. They help us with getting cell phones for the families. They help with down payments on cars, because you can't get a job without a car and you can't get a car without a job. Our banks have gotten creative and mitigated risk, spread out the risk by working together, so they can provide house loans, things like that. So we've got a few grants out there. But like I said, for the most part, the only thing we take advantage of is Medicaid. So.
Yeah.
That's the ending.
All three of us